Good morning. I'm holding a baby. It's very cute and very full right now. Welcome. Please stand, join me with my friends Olivia and Tim. I've got Peace Like a River, number 100. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river in my soul. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river in my soul. Joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain in my soul. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain in my soul. Love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean in my soul. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean in my soul. Strength like a mountain. I've got strength like a mountain. I've got strength like a mountain. I've got strength like a mountain in my soul. I've got strength like a mountain. I've got strength like a mountain. I've got strength like a mountain in my soul.
Yay! I think that's the first time that Madeline's not had to toot her own horn, right? Actually, Madeline never needs to toot her own horn. She's very talented, but it's also great to have Tim and Olivia with us this morning. Thank you so much for being here. Yeah. And more to come. Well, welcome everyone to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Spokane, where we join together to create a nourishing, liberal religious home and to champion justice, diversity, and environmental stewardship in our wider world. Or as we like to say in short, to create community, find meaning, and live justly. Whoa, did I say that by myself? We can do better than that. You want to try it again? Or in short, to create community, find meaning, and live justly. Or work for justice, both work. So welcome to each and every one of you. So good to have you here, whether you're one of our regular attendees or joining us for the first time, or one of the many of you who are joining us via our live stream. It's great to have all of you with us this morning. I do want to start with saying Happy Father's Day. Yep, I heard a whistle back there. Was that you? Oh, there you go. So somebody who's musically talented gave that whistle because it. And for those who don't know, or even if you do, Spokane is actually the home of Father's Day, and it was really created the brainchild of Sonora Dodd, who is known as the mother of Father's Day, playfully as the mother of Father's Day. She was inspired by her father, William Jackson Smart, who raised her and her brother as a single father after their mother died during childbirth. And must have been a great dad, because when Mother's Day came along, she said, fathers need to have one too. And so if you go up here to Greenwood Memorial Cemetery, up on the second level, there's a monument to Sonora Dodd, And it's the only marker to an individual. There's several very interesting people there, but the only marker to an individual that is accompanied by a bench. And on that bench, there's an engraving of her father's image, so side by side with Sonora Dodd. So this was, we held the first Father's Day here in Spokane on June 19th, 1910. And Woodrow Wilson was so impressed by the idea, thought it was such a great idea that he telegraphed Spokane praising it. And then not too long after that, Lyndon B. Johnson recognized it by proclamation. And then in 1972, Richard Nixon declared it a national holiday. So all that from right here in Spokane. And I love the story of somebody who was cared for and nurtured by her father and appreciated him enough that she thought all fathers should have a day to honor them. So you can go up there and see it yourself. I've been doing a little bit of a video story on Greenwood and its history, and I visited many of the markers. So if you've not taken a tour of Greenwood Memorial Cemetery, which is actually the first public cemetery in Spokane. So there's a lot of rich history there, a lot of markers. You can walk around and meet some of the permanent residents at Greenwood. Oh, and on that note, I do want to remind you that next Saturday at 2 here at the UU Church, we'll be having a celebration of life, a memorial service for one of our church members, Steve Parker. Steve, for those who didn't know Steve, he was really a longtime member of the church, but kind of a quiet guy. Unless he was out on the streets or at city council or someplace marching or speaking for the many causes that he believed in. So we miss him. He died rather suddenly and unexpectedly, and his family in particular has asked that I let you know about his memorial service so that you can come and help remember him if you're able. All right, with that said, I want to invite another special guest who's with us today, Kelsey Dorr, who is part of a refugee youth program, and she's going to explain more about the program and how we might get involved, and also a little bit about folks' opportunity to talk more with you after the service. So, yes, welcome.
Hello, my name is Kelsey, and I work for our refugee foster care program. So this month is World Refugee Month, which is a great time to celebrate and appreciate the many individuals who have traveled far to flee persecution and seek asylum here in the U.S. So here in Spokane, we have such a diverse range of people who call Spokane home, and our refugee foster care program serves youth who made that journey on their own and do not have family who can care for them. So we place them with foster families here in the area that help them get that start in the world and begin their lives now in the U.S. And so I was hoping to share a little information about refugees that call Spokane home and our program specifically, so you're welcome to come and talk to me afterwards. But yesterday was World Refugee Day here in Spokane, and the ceremony was off to a great start until it started hailing on us. So it was a lot of people crowding under tents, and one of the sweet moments was when a Ukrainian man brought out his accordion and started playing music, and we all joined in song, and it was really the Spokane that I love to call home, and so it was a really positive moment. So thank you guys for coming out, and if you'd like to learn more about the ways we're serving refugee youth or how you can be involved, you can find me afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelsey, and for the good work you're doing and for being here this morning. And Kelsey has a little tabled area back there that you can go and learn more about what she's doing after the service. So we are going to, actually, no, we should take a few, sorry, I almost skipped the welcoming one another. Now that you're seated and comfortable and quiet, get up and make some noise. Say hi to somebody that you've been looking forward to seeing, or maybe make some new friends today. All right, more opportunity to visit as always during our social hour following the service. But let's move forward now by lighting our chalice, the symbol of our unity and our solidarity, of our openness and our inclusion, of our community and our individual uniqueness. May this small flame be our offering of warmth to those who are cold and alone, and a light to those in darkness. May it be a flame that ignites justice in our world and a beacon of hope to those in need. And may it reflect at least a spark of truth wherever truth has been lost, and cast a healthy shadow of doubt wherever it's been found.
Our opening reflection this morning is from British evolutionary biologist, zoologist, and author of Too Many Books to Name, Richard Dawkins. This quote is from The Magic of Reality: How We Know What's Really True. The whole world is made up of incredibly tiny things, much too small to be visible to the naked eye. And yet none of the myths or so-called holy books that some people, even now, think were given to us by an all-knowing God mentions them at all. In fact, when you look at those myths and stories, you can see that they don't contain any of the knowledge that science has patiently worked out. They don't tell us how big or how old the universe is. They don't tell us how to treat cancer. They don't explain gravity or the internal combustion engine. They don't tell us about germs or nuclear fusion or electricity or anesthetics. In fact, unsurprisingly, the stories in holy books don't contain any more information about the world than was known to the primitive people who first started telling them. If these holy books really were written or dictated or inspired by all-knowing gods, don't you think it's odd that those gods said nothing about any of these important and very useful things?
Please stand, join me for next hymn, What Wondrous Love, number 18.
What wondrous love is this, O my soul, O my soul? What wondrous love is this, O my soul? What wondrous love is this that brings my heart such bliss and takes away the pain of my soul, that takes away the pain of my soul. When I was sinking down, sinking down, sinking down, when I was sinking down, sinking down, when I was sinking down beneath my sorrow's ground, friends to me gathered round, oh my soul, friends to me gathered round, oh my soul. To love and to all friends I will sing, to love and to all friends I will sing, to love and to all friends who pain and sorrow mend, with thanks unto the end I will sing, with thanks unto the end I will sing.
Thank you. We're now going to kindle our candles of care for those most on our hearts and minds, and we begin as we have been on behalf of the people of Ukraine and that region of the world that are suffering from the violence and destruction there, and for the people of Israel and the Palestinians who are suffering from the terrible violence there, as well as all of these people who are currently in the hope that there might be some sort of ceasefire and moment of sanity. So we kindle a candle sharing that same hope. Let's take a moment of silence on behalf of others you might be thinking of, and as always, you're welcome to name them aloud if you'd like. Those named aloud and those embraced in our silence, and all those who are suffering in our world at this hour, we hold in our community with compassion. This is the third Sunday of the month when we hold a special collection for a cause or group in our community that we want to support. And today's special collection is actually for my discretionary fund. This is a fund that I mostly use on occasion for members and sometimes others who are in need of a little financial assistance from time to time. So even though it is at my discretion, it is really an expression of your generosity and care. So I appreciate that you have always been very generous and supportive of this fund. It makes it easier for me to say yes. So I appreciate that. You will find a special collection envelope in your order of service. Please use that if you want to contribute, so we'll know what it's for. As always, no need to seal the envelope. We can reuse it that way. If you're joining us online, you can always go online and contribute and just let us know that it's for today's special collection. So again, thank you in advance for your generosity. We now, of course, are gratefully giving and receiving this morning's offering, which sustains this community and our mission to the larger world.
I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for me and you. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I see skies of blue, and clouds of white, the bright blessed day, the dark sacred night, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I hear babies cry, I watch them grow. They'll learn much more than I'll ever know. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Oh, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world.
Time for our story for all ages. And I think we'll just continue. If you come forward, I'll walk you around and point to things. I'll say, what's that? What's that? No, I got a little more today. I brought a guest, of course, as always. You may remember this guest, a regular attendee of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Spokane. Have you met? Yes, you've met one of my favorite guests. This is a famous discoverologist, Professor Marty Pants, with a Z. I know. You've said that enough. I've got it by now. So, Professor Pants with a Z, welcome and happy Father's Day. I presume that you are a father. Yes, and I've just discovered it. Well, if anybody was saying that but you, I'd be a little bit worried. But as a discoverologist, I've learned that you say that about everything. So why don't you remind us what a discoverologist is? Of course. A discoverologist is a ditetyl a human being, who utilizes protoplasmic extremities. That's hard to say without moving your lips, isn't it? Yes, it is. You mean your hands and ocular faculties, your eyes, to ascertain the phenomenon, to discover things. So he's a human being who uses his hands and eyes to discover things. You get that? Okay. All right. So it's really perfect for you to come today because I'm going to be talking later about some of the best ways to think. Not what to think, but how to think. And given that you're an expertise, maybe you could share some of your thoughts with us about what you think. Yes, I know all about thinking. After all, I discovered it. Yes, you discovered it. How'd you know? Well, I just know. So your reputation precedes. So would you please tell us what you think some of the best ways to go about thinking are? First and foremost is curiosity. Curiosity. Yes, you must wonder. Always wonder about, so you're willing to learn new things. Well, that sounds pretty good. Anything else? Awe and wonder. It truly is a wonderful world. Discover new things every day, even if somebody else has already discovered them. Okay, that sounds like pretty good advice. What else? Well, don't be afraid of discovering things yourself for the first time, even if others have already discovered it. Yes, you're very good at that. What are some of the things that you guys think involves being a good thinker? Any ideas? Nothing? What he said? Oh, yes, and I discovered it. Yes, you did. Anything else? Math? Being good at math makes you a good thinker? Very good. Did you know that? Yes, I discovered it. You did. Anything else? Math? No? What about being, science? Yeah, okay. So what would science involve? A lot of math and thinking. Very good. I discovered that, you know. Yes, I'm sure you did. Okay, what about, how about being open-minded to others? Of course, I discovered that. I'm sure you did. Well, you guys are on your road to being pretty good thinkers. I can tell you because you're sitting there thinking right now. That's always the start, just to use your minds in a way that helps you come up with new information, new ideas, things maybe you haven't thought about before. So maybe you'll go around this week, and as you're going through life, you'll say, hey, here's a good way to approach things that I hadn't thought about before, because I'm thinking about thinking. All right. Yes, that's another good thing. Think about thinking. I discovered that. When did you discover it? Just now. Okay. Well, anyway, Professor Pants, that's Pants with a Z. It's always great to have you with us. Thank you for enlightening us with your many wonderful discoveries. Good day, children. I guess we'll sing you. Will we sing you out? Or will we sing you over? You don't know. I don't either. But we're going to sing. Will we sing? Or are we going to sing? Go. Oh, you're going to sing. Okay, go ahead.
Go now in peace, go now in peace. May the spirit of love surround you everywhere, everywhere you may go.
As we move into a time of meditation, you're invited to find a comfortable, receptive position. Close your eyes if you wish. Take a few deeper breaths and reflect on another quote by Richard Dawkins. After sleeping through 100 million centuries, we have finally opened our eyes on a sumptuous planet, sparkling with color, bountiful with life. Within decades, we must close our eyes again. Isn't it a noble, an enlightened way of spending our brief time in the sun to work at understanding the universe and how we have come to wake up in it?
Oh, I'm sorry, you're going to do that.
Bouvons bien la bouvons donc à ces flacons, faisons la guerre. Bouvons bien la bouvons donc à ces flacons, faisons la guerre. En mangeant d'un gras jambon à ces flacons, faisons la guerre. Quand je bois de vin clé, ami tout tourne, aussi désormais je bois à jour, arboué. Quand je bois du vin clé, ami tout tourne, aussi désormais je bois à jour, arboué. Chantons et buvons, simple qu'on fasse à la guerre. Chantons et buvons, les amis, buvons donc. Chantons et buvons, simple qu'on fasse à la guerre. Chantons et buvons, les amis, buvons donc. Quand je bois de la carré, ami tout tourne, aussi désormais je bois à jour, arboué. Quand je bois de vin clairé, ami tout tourne, aussi désormais je bois à jour, arboué. Chantons et buvons, simple qu'on fasse à la guerre. Chantons et buvons, les amis, buvons donc. Chantons et buvons, simple qu'on fasse à la guerre. Chantons et buvons, les amis, buvons donc.
He's very good at the what's that game. It's so interesting to see his interest in discovery, right? To point at something and have him immediately at his age go to it and track your fingers pointing at something and look at it. What's that? What's that? What's that? That's ultimately what my sermon is about today. So see you later. So nice having you. So when contemplating the rise of Greek philosophy and its significance to human thought and progress, I like to summarize the words of Bertrand Russell, who said, the rise of Greek civilization, which produced this outburst of intellectual activity, is one of the most spectacular events in history. Nothing like it has ever occurred before or since. Considering that this outburst began in a couple of ancient cities along the Ionian coast in the 6th century BCE, 2,600 years ago, Russell's statement from his 1959 book, The Wisdom of the West, seems astonishing, if not an exaggeration. In our modern age, with all we have since accomplished and are still accomplishing today, how can we possibly consider the intellectual activity of a few ancient islanders the most spectacular event in history? Yet, I believe that Russell's claim remains true today, even in our age of computer technology, satellites and rocket ships, and the advent of artificial intelligence, none of which existed in 1959 when Russell spoke his words. Because all of our greatest intellectual accomplishments today and throughout our history remain rooted in the thinking established by the earliest Greek philosophers. This is true not because of what they thought, but because of how they thought. The early philosophers sought to understand the world on its own terms, as it presents itself, rather than upon superstitious, mythical, or religious explanations. And this is the only kind of thinking. And I don't use those words like only and all or none very often. This is the only kind of thinking that has ever allowed us to accomplish the scientific, medical, and technological advances that we have today, among other important accomplishments. No voodoo ceremonies or faith healings have ever led us to a single vaccine or antibiotic. Worshippers of the moon may have danced underneath its soft light, but none of them ever took one small step upon its surface, let alone made a giant leap for all mankind. Religion may help some individuals better cope with the world we live in, while leading others into denial and delusional thinking. Although their adherents often believe that their particular religion might do so if only they could make converts of everybody else on the planet. The early Greek philosophers, often referred to, and improperly I think, as the pre-Socratic philosophers, were the first thinkers that we know of who attempted to explain the world in natural rather than supernatural terms. An ancient Babylonian myth, for example, says the world was created from the remains of a sea monster, Tiamat, by Odin, the All-Father, from the remains of an ice giant that he had slain. And the more familiar Hebrew myth claims that it was fashioned in just 6 days by the voice commands of the Elohim. These are superstitious and mythical explanations of reality, but the early philosophers were what we call first principle thinkers. They wanted to know what the world and reality are at the most elemental level, the ultimate stuff from which everything else proceeds. That was the question on their minds. Today we would call the stuff that they were seeking quanta, or perhaps even qubits if you're into information theory. But these early thinkers did not have the advantage of nearly 3 millennia of such thinking to build upon. They were starting from nothing. And remarkably, within less than 2 centuries, about 150 years, they arrived at the answer that scientists continue to agree with today, that reality is comprised of atoms. This is the great benefit of the power of not what, but how these ancient thinkers thought. Their way of thinking has allowed and continues to allow human civilization to advance, and it is the only thing that ever has. Unlike the stagnation that lasts far longer when humanity is mired in superstition and mass delusion. In seeking to explain the nature of reality, the very first of these first philosophers, referred to as the Ionians, from the cities of Miletus, Colophon, and Ephesus, began by trying to determine what the underlying element of all things might be. Before we get into that, what they thought, why them? Why then? In her book, The Greek Way, the 19th and 20th century renowned educator and author Edith Hamilton suggests that it was the ancient Greeks' love of play that was the major factor in the rise of philosophy. Because their natural environment gave them a lot of security, freeing them from being in defensive mode all the time, Hamilton says, the joy of life found expression. The Greeks were the very first people in the world to play, and they played on a great scale. If we had no other knowledge of what the Greeks were like, if nothing were left of Greek art or literature, the fact that they were in love with play and played magnificently would be proof enough of how they lived and how they looked at life. In their book, The Worlds of the Early Greek Philosophers, J.B. Wilbur and H.J. Allen say the playing of games is an affair of the imagination and the mind as well as the competitive spirit. It is an ordered activity, and the Greek genius may be looked upon as the fusing of order and action on one of the highest levels of excellence ever attained by mankind. In other words, their thinking, though playful, wasn't wildly imaginative, hoping to stumble upon the right idea. It became disciplined, like the discipline of athletes, like mastering a game. These thinkers wanted to understand how best to go about thinking in a way that leads to their goal, that leads to their win, which would be better understanding the nature of the world and of reality. In this way, the first philosophers learned how to reason, and even developed early forms of scientific experimentation. Again, as Wilbur and Allen explain, reliance on rational rather than the mythological explanation is a marked characteristic of the early Greek philosophers. It is perhaps the trait, more than any other, that distinguishes them as philosophers, their ability to reason. Wilbur and Allen outline other factors that may also contribute to how these early Greeks came to think, like the particular lighting, the sunlight of the region's unique landscape and mostly cloudless skies that gave them an eye for depth and detail and differences. If the Greeks were the world's first true philosophers, in that they formed a consistent and straightforward vocabulary for abstract ideas, they say, it was largely because their minds, like their eyes, sought naturally what is lucid and well-defined. The unusual economy of the region is another factor thought to have influenced their thinking. Because the area was largely unsuited for agriculture, its inhabitants depended upon commerce. which led to the arrival of merchants and artisans and traders and industry from many other places, adding to the diversity of culture and thought they were exposed to, along with the necessity of tolerance and curiosity that goes with it. As Heraclitus said, those who love wisdom must be inquirers into very many things indeed. This, of course, is what the word philosophy means, the love of wisdom. Philosophers must be interested in very many things indeed. Additionally, the early Greeks had no priestly class to dictate what their beliefs ought to be, which also gave them a unique degree of intellectual freedom for the ancient world, a fact making it possible for the poet and the philosopher to assume their important roles in society. There are other contributing factors that may also help explain why the Ionians in particular, and some of the early philosophers who came after them, gave rise to this most spectacular outburst of intellectual activity in human history. But we already have enough to consider a few of the qualities that define how they thought. Be playful and imaginative with your ideas. Become skilled in the use of reason. Notice the things that contrast and contradict what we think and see and believe we know. Welcome a free exchange of ideas from different people and places. Maintain a society that encourages the freedom to think for oneself. That was the atmosphere. And these are the same qualities that make us spectacular thinkers today, or can make us spectacular thinkers today. And in my opinion, again, are the only qualities that can and ever have. When they are absent, at best, nothing good is accomplished. At worst, terrible things happen. And I'll come back to this, but first let's consider some of what these early philosophers themselves accomplished. Thales of Miletus, considered the first philosopher, born around 625 BCE, is the very first thinker we know of who attempted to explain the world by engaging in experimentation, mathematics, and reason. His new way of thinking was so unusual that some wondered what good it was and began to poke fun at Thales. One legend has him falling into a well while looking up at the stars. The child scoffs. Thales is so eager to know what is happening in the sky that he can't see what's right in front of his own feet. So Thales, who had discovered key principles in geometry, astronomy, and meteorology, enough to actually predict eclipses and those sort of things, once used his knowledge to predict a better than usual olive season. So he rented a poor man, but used what resources he had to rent all the olive presses in the area in advance. And as those olives began to ripen, the growers had to rent them back from Thales at a hefty price, making him wealthy for a time, but that was not his interest. It said that Thales did so just to prove to them that philosophy could be useful, and he got rid of that money and lived his life of poverty and wonder. Because that's not what he was interested in. That's not what philosophy is about. These earliest philosophers were elementalist, meaning that they tried to figure out the fundamental element in all things. And they didn't have anything like our periodic table, and initially no atomic theory. To them, the elements were the things that they could see and touch and experience and attest to. Thales believed that the primal stuff is water, for reasons it's not necessary to go into here. His student, Anaximander, also of Miletus, was a bit more abstract in his thinking and referred to the fundamental substance as apeiron, translated best as the boundless. Anaximander didn't think that the first principle could be anything finite, so he gave whatever it is a name reflective of its infinite nature. Now, if this seems a bit out there, keep in mind that Anaximander was down to earth enough to have been the inventor of the sundial, maker of the first map, including an ocean, the first to have constructed a globe, the builder of a clock, and was the first to claim that life began as mud and slime and that humans evolved from fish. That in just the first few years of philosophy, of philosophizing. This is powerful stuff. Anaximenes, another Milesian, 25 years younger than Anaximander, though his student, was more aligned with Thales in his thinking, but instead of water, he considered air to be the primary element. As the soul, being air, holds us together, he said, so do breath and air surround the universe. It kind of makes sense through observation, right? That most of what's in this room is air. Most of what's out there is air. Most of what's in the universe is empty space, where air at least could be believed to exist. He also observed that air is what thickens and becomes clouds, condenses and becomes rain, freezes and turns into snow and ice, hence showing that it can become other things. He further speculated that when fine, it can become fire. And we all know, of course, oxygen fuels fire. He probably came to this conclusion because he saw that it could fan flames. And when thickened, he said it not only becomes water, but also, right, vaporizes, becomes water, but then mud. And then as that mud dries, it hardens and even can turn into stone. So he reasoned. Rain makes mud, the mud dries, then it hardens from the sun. So although he did not engage in some experimentation that we might call science, most of what these early philosophers conjectured was based upon their mere observation and rational inferences, because that's what they had. What are we actually experiencing, and what can we infer from that? Perhaps the most familiar early philosopher is, who can you think of? Heraclitus? Everybody know you know it. You can't step in the same river twice. Thank you, yes. So Heraclitus therefore considered fire to be the most fundamental element, because fire is always changing, and fire has the ability to change other things, to transform or transmute other things. So it appeared. So we already have what came to be considered the only elements at the time: water, air, fire, along with earth. And Empedocles, born 15 years after Heraclitus' death, was the first to argue for a complex universe comprised of multiple elements. There weren't that many of them, just the four, which he called the four roots, which transformed into other things through what he also called the forces of love and strife, which today we might say are akin to attraction and entropy. Other early philosophers came along and wondered how, if the universe is infinite, anything can be finite, and vice versa. If something is finite, how could anything be infinite? I won't go into the reasons for those questions here. Parmenides argued that change and motion must therefore be illusions, because true reality is unchanging and eternal. And his student Zeno famously came up with a variety of paradoxes to prove his mentor's point. Because an arrow seen to be moving, for instance, always occupies 2 points in space, it is by definition always at rest. It's a paradox. And such thinking may seem absurd or rather impractical to some, but it demonstrates philosophy's general ability to continue questioning what seems obviously true to us so that we are not fooled by mere appearances. Were it not for such thinking, the early philosophers would never have evolved past thinking the primal stuff of the universe must be something that we can observe, like one of those 4 elements. Today, we know that there are at least 118 elements on the periodic table. Yet this way of thinking is so powerful that, again, within less than 150 years after the first philosopher Thales was born, Leucippus and his student Democritus developed atomic theory. In 150 years of trying to figure out what the fundamental stuff of the universe is, these early philosophers came up with atomic theory. Right? The theory that small indivisible particles are eternally moving in a void and combine in various ways to create the visible world. And their science wasn't nearly as advanced as today's, but within a relatively short period, they essentially figured it out. The stuff of the universe. As free and independent thinkers, through their own observations and building upon each other's logical arguments, they came to understand the underlying nature of reality nearly 2,500 years before modern scientists would rediscover and prove it. Because they turn to nature itself to figure things out, they are sometimes referred to as the natural philosophers. Aristotle, who greatly admired them, called them the physikoi, which we might translate as the physicist, but the root of this word, physis, actually means nature. So both labels are appropriate. Whether we call them the physicists, the natural philosophers, or even the pre-Socratic, which I think makes them subsidiary to Socrates, which is why I prefer the first philosophers, because I think they were the greatest. Philosophy went downhill with Socrates. That's an unpopular opinion, but I believe it's true. So the early philosophers remain exemplars of how we ought to think if we want humanity to progress, human civilization to progress. Alas, their time was brief compared to the tenure of the Holy Roman Empire that condemned all Greek philosophy as paganism, destroyed as much as 90% of their writings, and ushered humanity into a near millennium, a near 1,000 years of intellectual stagnation and misery. This is so, I'd suggest, because the kind of thinking that dominated this dark age was the antithesis of the kind of thinking that made the first philosophers spectacular. Instead of being playful and imaginative, it was dogmatic and constraining. It was based upon superstition rather than reason. It refused to allow the mere utterance of any conflicting and contradictory views. It forced everyone to hold and profess the same beliefs and was hostile towards those with different ideas. It was not an ideological free society, but one bound by the dogmas and the dictums handed down to them by authoritarians. During their era, by contrast, the early philosophers, using reason to grapple with the world on its own terms, natural and physical terms, developed heliocentric models of the universe, along with elemental, evolutionary, and atomic theories of life and reality. They discovered musical octaves, irrational numbers, meteorology, paleontology, and other practical applications of understanding the natural world. And they engaged in early scientific experimentation, medicine, and even surgery. Right? The Hippocratic Oath, which says first do no harm, actually means the opposite of what we think. It was given by the philosopher Hippocrates in opposition to surgery. It was very new. And the argument was, geez, it seems like whatever else we do, we shouldn't cut into somebody who's not feeling well. First, do no harm. So it was a protest of surgery. By the way, you can't really do good medicine without some harm. Almost all medicine has some kind of side effects. And some of the treatments necessary to help us survive some of the worst illnesses require us to be pretty sick in the process. So we have to do harm, some harm, to have the best outcome. But still, you hear those in the profession use this phrase, first do no harm, is sort of differently than it was intended. But the point here is that all of this occurred in a relatively brief period of time, about 150 years, compared to the near 1,000 years of relative stagnation that was to follow once that thinking was suppressed. But the early philosophers weren't entirely without opposition during their own lives, although such opposition also presented itself mostly in the form of philosophy and honest inquiry. Pythagoras, for example, also counted among the early philosophers, he was from Italy, disagreed with the Ionian emphasis on physics in the natural world. Pythagoras rather believed that everything in the entire universe came down to mathematics, which he often explained in moving and poetic terms, religious terms. The phrase, the music of the spheres, comes from Pythagoras. Indeed, he was both a philosopher and a priest, the founder of a religion named after him, Pythagoreanism, which took on some of the dogmatism and authoritarianism eventually that religion is too often known for. Pythagoras believed, for example, in the eternal soul, and that all is number, and all things exist in number. Strange as this theme seems, Pythagoras and his school were the discoverers of musical octaves and the Pythagorean theorem and other mathematical truths that are still beneficial to physicists and engineers, for that matter. But his thinking contradicts the Ionian philosophers' attempt to understand reality by physically grappling with the reality before us. Right? By physically acknowledging our experience versus the ideas that tell us how to interpret it, or the dogmas, or the myths, or the superstitions. As Greek historian Benjamin Farrington explains, herein lay a danger. Mathematics not only seemed to provide a better explanation of things than the Ionian view, it kept the souls of the brethren pure from contact with the earthly, the material, and suited the changing temper of a world in which contempt for manual labor kept pace with the growth of slavery. In a society in which contact with the technical processes of production became ever more shameful, as being fit only for slaves, it was found extraordinarily fortunate that the secret constitution of things should be revealed, not to those who manipulate them, not to those who worked with fire, but to those who drew patterns in the sand. There wasn't a lot of pens and parchment paper in those days, so Pythagoreans did their math in the sand. And for them, that was the extent of their meaningful interactions with the physical world. Like many, if not most, religions, in trying to understand reality, they came to despise the physical world and to escape its reality by retreating into their ideas about it, leaving the real world, considered sinful or fallen or illusionary or the cause of suffering, and so on. I've just been reading the book, The Anxious Generation, by Jonathan Haidt, whom I greatly admire. But he has a section in there on spirituality, and I'm troubled by it for the same reason, because he seems to interpret spirituality and religion, of which he admits he's not an expert, and he's only speaking as a human, not a sociologist, but as a means of transcending where we're at as individuals, and moving into a experience of collectivism, of oneness with the group. And as liberals, we don't necessarily see that as a good thing, and I don't. I think whatever kind of philosophy we ascribe to, it needs to bring us into contact with reality, whatever that is, with the world as it is, on its own terms. To cope with its suffering, to not escape it, to cope with the problem of evil and not escape it, so that we can enjoy one another's friendship, and so that we can enjoy what a wonderful world it is, in addition to the downside. But that tends to be what religion does, is provide us an escape. We think we're spiritual if we're not earthly. I don't like it. And this is why, to me, the very first of the first philosophers, regardless of whatever principle they came to believe in, demonstrate for us the principles necessary for the kind of thinking that will make human civilization more just, while enabling us to progress together, no matter our differences. These principles were rediscovered during the Renaissance, a word that refers to the renewal or the renewed interest in the pre-Socratic philosophers specifically. That's what the Renaissance was, a rediscovery of those forgotten thinkers, and more importantly, not what they thought, but how they thought. That's what made the Renaissance great, and that's what enabled us to begin to emerge from the Dark Age, from that millennium of stupidity, which led to the Enlightenment, during which such thinking flourished, as did human civilization, incredibly, for another 2 centuries, until around 1950, with the advent of postmodernism, when a new age of endarkenment marked by intolerance and stagnation and a denial of objective reality and of our common humanity began descending upon humanity. Today we are in desperate need of a new renaissance, another rediscovery of the only way of thinking that has ever allowed us to emerge from darkness and to move together toward the promise of human progress. It doesn't matter what we think, so long as we pay attention to how we think. Be playful and imaginative in your ideas. Become skilled in the use of reason. Notice the things that contrast and contradict what we think we see and know. Welcome a free exchange of ideas from different people, from different places, and maintain a society that encourages the freedom to think for oneself. This is our intellectual heritage as liberals, in which lies humanity's best hope and its greatest potential. Thank you. Thank you.
Please stand, join me for our last hymn, number 1007, There's a River Flowing in My Soul.
It's okay. There we go. Okay.
There it is. I got it. There's a river flowing in my soul. There's a river flowing in my soul. And it's telling me that I'm somebody. There's a river flowing in my soul. There's a river flowing in my heart. There's a river flowing in my heart. And it's telling me that I'm somebody. There's a river flowing in my heart. There's a river flowing in my mind. There's a river flowing in my mind. And it's telling me that I'm somebody. There's a river flowing in my mind. There's a river flowing. There's a river flowing. There's a river flowing in my soul.
Our benediction today is from the late Reverend Dr. John W. Brigham. Go your ways, knowing not the answer to all things, yet seeking always the answer to one more thing than you know. Amen. Blessed be. Salam alaikum and shalom.
Shalom Chavarim, Shalom Chavarim, Shalom, Shalom. Shalom Chavarim, Shalom Chavarim, Shalom, Shalom.
Just a closer walk with thee. Granted, Jesus, it's my plea. feeble life is o'er, and time for me shall be no more. Just guide me gently, safely o'er to that shore, to your kingdom.